Thank you very much, everybody, for coming, firstly. It's an absolute pleasure to stand here in front of all of you and be given the task of talking a little bit about our community and what's been going on recently. For any of you who haven't spoken to, my name is Phil Ewels. I work at Seqera, and I've been involved with the Nextflow community for a long time and worked with many of you in this room, both with Nextflow and with NF Core. And I'm just kind of going to talk to you today a little bit about a bit of an introduction to Nextflow and NF Core. Maybe some of you in the room are relatively new to the ecosystem, so just a bit of background, touch on a couple of points which I think are sometimes missed. And I'll go through some of the things we've been working on and seeing coming out of the community in the last kind of 12 months or so, and then wrap up with a couple of new things that we're bringing out for you. So Nextflow is, of course, now with our lovely new logo, is a kind of a powerful engine that drives all of this. It's the language and the runtime, which allows you to write your analysis pipeline, run it on pretty much any compute infrastructure, work with any storage. And like any kind of programming language, it's as powerful as the person writing the code. And you can write Nextflow pipelines in any way that you feel, really. And when we started NF Core, it really initiated around this idea of trying to take the incredible flexibility of Nextflow, but constrain it slightly to make it easier for collaboration. And so within NF Core, we love standards, we love rules, we love consistent code formatting, and all those lovely things. And by doing that, we can really bring together hundreds or even thousands of people to work on a single code base. And this is made possible by the power of Nextflow itself, that we can actually all work on the same code base and use that analysis pipeline that's built on so many different diverse infrastructures and so many different types of data. And it's a real testament to the power of the underlying kind of tool. And also the power of this kind of grassroots community where we are driven mostly by people using the tools. I think, I'm curious, okay, how many people in the room, put your hand up if you are personally involved in writing some Nextflow code? Yeah, so Nextflow is not some kind of software tool that's written by people employed to sell a product. It's written by people who need it. And pipelines are written by users. And that strength of that kind of grassroots community really drives everything we do and makes it such a pleasure to run events like this and see the enthusiasm and see all these ideas come together. So before I did anything to do with software, I'm primarily a scientist, and I love to start with some numbers. So what's the shape of our community? How are we kind of growing over time? We've got well over 700. You can count contributors in different ways, but we have many hundreds now of people writing code and collaborating on NF Core repositories, which is incredible. We have over 8,000 people following us on social media. I'm not sure if Twitter is really the best example to give these days, but it's kind of where we started, at least. So it's our strongest user base across the social channels, which is a huge number. And now over 10,000 people signed up to our Slack organizations, which I remember when we hit 100 people and I was floored. So to hit 10,000 people, it just blows my mind every time I see this number. And this number just keeps going up. I keep thinking to myself, how many bioinformaticians can there be in the world? And my expectations keep kind of getting smashed. So this is just we've got two Slack organizations, one for NF Core and one for Nextflow. This is just the NF Core membership. You can see two things here. Firstly, you can see when the Twitter API broke all of our stats collection metrics in April. And then also you can see at the end the number of active users jumps. That's partially true. It's also partially that Slack changed their billing policies and how they define what an active user is. But whichever way you read the graph, you can see the main thing here is that we are growing and continuing to grow with no signs of slowing down. And these numbers on the y-axis, the shape of this graph has been the same every time I've given this talk for the past 3 or 4 years, but the numbers on the y-axis just keep on growing. And that's just fantastic to see. And you can dig into this a bit more with the active Slack members, of people who are kind of posting and also logging in to find answers. And again, these numbers are just huge. And when we did our last community training, which is online, anyone who hasn't seen it, we do written training materials which are freely available at training.nextflow.io. And then we do live video tutorials which go out on YouTube. And we handle the questions in real time over Slack. And in March earlier this year, we had over 1,500 people logging into Nextflow, into the NF Core Slack within a single week, which is incredible. So I'm happy to say that the community is looking healthier than it ever has, and all signs are great. And really, the final number for the Nextflow is more than just NF Core, and I think most people in the room will agree with me that if you're writing Nextflow code, you're probably checking the Nextflow docs at least once a day. And so kind of one of our gold metrics for assessing the size of our community is just to look at how many people are looking at the Nextflow docs. And we're reaching up close to 20,000 unique IPs per month at the moment. So this is kind of, I would say, the kind of pretty accurate idea of just how big the Nextflow community is, and it's getting massive. Okay, so next, I actually added these slides in relatively recently off the back of a few conversations I'd had. And it was quite interesting yesterday at the NF Core hackathon that we had just upstairs. We had a beginners table. And what transpired is that really none of the people sat there were beginners, but everyone were bioinformaticians who are maybe new to Nextflow or new to NF Core. And the conversation I had there, which I've had quite a lot of times recently, is about how you can use NF Core. NF Core started by collaborating on pipelines, and that's kind of still the prevailing view, which is that NF Core is a suite of pipelines that you can take off the shelf and run as a resource. And that's true. It is a fantastic resource. But what's changed over the last kind of year, maybe year and a half, with the advent of Nextflow DSL2, is that we can make that code more modular, and by the power, again, of underlying Nextflow tooling, we can then start to collaborate on more levels than just pipelines. And what this means is that you can start to develop your own pipelines with NF Core tooling and NF Core framework. And so we've already kind of heard this mentioned quite a few times this afternoon in earlier talks by Robert, for example, who's developed Backtopia, which is not an NF Core pipeline, but has NF Core modules within it. And so this is kind of a quick schematic to give an idea of what this terminology means. The pipeline is the top level thing. That's the thing you run as an end user. You do Nextflow run pipeline, and you never need to know about any of the rest of it unless you're developing pipelines. But within NF Core, we then have sub-workflows, which are kind of chunks of workflows, basically, and then modules, which are individual tool wrappers. So if you've heard those terms bandied around, this is kind of an idea of what it is that we're talking about here. And coming back to the numbers then, if we look at NF Core, we now have 93 different pipelines, which by itself is a big number, but is a particularly big number when you bear in mind that with NF Core, one of our kind of core guidelines that we started the community with is that we only have one pipeline per data type. So there is one RNA-seq pipeline. And this was kind of the foundation of NF Core, really, was to really force people to collaborate and not have competing pipelines developed by different groups. And so this isn't just 93 pipelines, this is 93 different data types, which is huge. And that covers most data types which are prevalent in genomics today, with new ones being added all the time. And now what we're really starting to see is that as the community grows, we're starting to see other types of data coming in. And NF Core came from genomics, but it's not restricted to genomics. And we're seeing pipelines for doing microscopy image analysis, working with proteomics data, and yeah, I think Evan mentioned we've got a proposal on a new pipelines channel on NF Core this week for an astronomy pipeline, working with data from the Meerkat telescope. We had a talk in Barcelona about material science. So we're starting to sort of see this run over, and the tooling, which is obviously applicable to so many different fields. And so it's really exciting to see us kind of moving on to this next phase. So 93 pipelines. And then those sub-workflows I mentioned, where kind of chunks of pipelines, it might be something which is commonly done in many genomics pipelines, for example, QC of FastQ data or something like that. We can now collaborate on that chunk and update it in one place and update all the pipelines using the same sub-workflow. So we have 54, this is probably outdated because we've just had a modules and sub-workflows group at the hackathon who have been adding new ones, so apologies, this is probably a bit higher now. 54-ish sub-workflows. And then at the bottom level, the modules for a single kind of tool wrapper, we now have over 1,000, which is amazing. So you really can kind of go in and view on the NF Core website this library of kind of Lego blocks, be it a single brick or a chunk of a wall or a whole house. And you can kind of mix and match according to your needs. And just like the size of the community, the number of pipelines that we're building just keeps on going up. And I'm kind of looking forward to a day which I think will come fairly soon when we break that threshold of 100 different pipelines. And quite interestingly, if you take a fragment of the NF Core template upon which all NF Core pipelines are built, kind of a random comment string or something, you can search GitHub for that just to get a rough feel for how many other people are using the NF Core template to build pipelines that we don't know about, like the dark matter of NF Core, and you get around 1,000 results. And that's just on GitHub. So many, many people building with NF Core, which really makes me very happy because it shows the value that we can bring to the biomedical community especially. A little bit now about NF Core tools. So we have the template and we've got these components. And what NF Core tools is an additional command line tool, actually written in Python, for working with NF Core pipelines. And again, it can be actually any Nextflow pipeline. And if you do install NF Core on the command line and do NF Core ---- help, you'll see a bunch of different subcommands kind of split up according to those which are good for people using Nextflow pipelines and people developing them. Things like listing available pipelines, also launching pipelines, which can be both a command line wizard if you're running offline on a cluster, or it can launch a rich graphical UI. Things for downloading pipelines so that you can transfer them to an offline system. And these commands are really being very heavily used by people in the community. And then in developers, we kind of joke that you can't do anything new in NF Core without creating a new lints test for it. And what this tooling does is kind of helps us to enforce consistency across pipelines. So if we change something, we make sure that the old file is removed. Or if we define a new style or a new standard, then we try and automate as much as we possibly can to ease the maintenance burden. And then there's tooling for creating new pipelines, adding a module to a pipeline, updating modules within a pipeline. And all these things really, really streamline and speed up the pace at which you can build a pipeline and keep it up to date. And what's really important is that these are for everyone, this tooling. Coming back to the same theme, NF Core tooling is for everybody. So if you want to do NF Core download, that should work with any Nextflow pipeline. And it will try and grab the containers and it will download it. If you want to add a module to a pipeline, as long as you follow the NF Core standards, that will add modules to any custom pipeline. And so this tooling is hopefully for the whole Nextflow community. And if you try it and it doesn't work, please tell us, because we're doing our best to kind of make it work with everything. Even if you're using GitLab instead of GitHub or anything like that, it should still work. And so, without having too hard on this, you can kind of get the picture that you can mix and match, have your own custom pipeline with NF Core components to whatever extent you like, and even have your own custom repository of modules written in the NF Core style, which are purely in-house for collaboration across teams within your company or institute, and mix and match those with modules which are available through the community. Right. Now I'd like to quickly touch on some of the new initiatives and things we've pushed out over the recent months to kind of, from our side, our community team within Seqera, and also from the community itself, which I think are particularly exciting. Something, if you're at a hackathon, you'll have heard mentioned a lot, or possibly even worked on directly, is this new framework for testing Nextflow code, which has come out of a group led by Lucas and Sebastian, and it's called NF Test. And this is great because for years, I think probably almost going back to the first Nextflow meeting I ever went to in 2017, there's been discussions about, it'd be great if we could come up with better unit testing for Nextflow code. You know, in the early days, we ran CI testing, which just ran the whole pipelines. We still do that kind of end to end, but it's been difficult to do granular testing. And with the advent of DSL2 and these shared modules, we now had individual kind of building bricks, which we could test one by one. And in NF Core, we've been using PyTest and PyTest workflows to do that. But it's still, we're sort of having to work the tooling around the code. And what NF Test does is it really kind of gives you this custom DSL written in Groovy, very similar to Nextflow. And it gives a much more integrated way and kind of seamless experience for writing tests for Nextflow code to ensure code quality. So this, I think, has been a huge success, this project, since they launched it not that long ago, and has seen a massive uptake. And now within NF Core, we've kind of decided to adopt this and are trying to set up NF tests for every module, all 1,000, every sub-workflow, and every pipeline. So if you're building your own pipelines, I recommend checking us out and trying it out. On the Nextflow side, something which kind of we've built into core Nextflow, or Paolo's built into core Nextflow functionality, it's been lurking for a while, but it's starting to kind of really see uptake in the community now, is a kind of a system for having plugins to extend Nextflow functionality. Like any plugin system, the idea basically that is you can write your own plugin Groovy code, compile it, release it, and we have a central location to kind of point to these releases. And then you just define the name of the plugin and the version in a config file, and that functionality will be rolled into the Nextflow runtime when you launch your pipeline. And we're starting to see real uptake of this system now to build in custom additional functionality, which is maybe kind of a bit beyond the borders of the core Nextflow tool itself, and really allows kind of an easier input for custom bespoke code and for community contributions. And we've got 3 plugins here which have all come out in the last year or year and a bit. The NF validation plugin, which we built from code which was originally in the NF Core template, and we spun that out into its own plugin, which keep all of the NF Core tooling and template as clean as possible, and now it has a lot more functionality. And this plugin can validate parameters that you used as inputs for a pipeline against a supplied Nextflow schema, JSON schema file, to give immediate validation of anything that's been submitted incorrectly. Also does things like generating nice command line help. And goes further than that now. You can also, if you have a JSON schema file for the input sample sheets, there's a new channel factory, so you can just say from sample sheet, and it will generate all the nicely formatted Nextflow channels with meta objects and all this kind of stuff. So it's very quickly become quite a key part of NF Core pipelines, and is a very powerful plugin for anyone else building. NF Prov is for provenance reporting, and really allows you to generate output files along with your Nextflow workflows, which are very, very detailed about exactly which steps ran, what output files were generated. And this is of particular interest to anyone working with, for example, compliance or ISO accreditation, clinical validation, things like this. And that's been, again, driven from requests from the community. And a fun one which was announced at the Barcelona summit is the NF CO2 footprint, where it's a collaboration with done from Cubic in Germany with Loic in Cambridge, who works on an algorithm to estimate CO2 emissions from energy usage. And because we have all the data about CPUs and memory and time and everything, we can estimate the kind of energy footprint of a given Nextflow run, and hopefully suggest improvements. And hopefully not just make you feel bad about all the tasks that failed and you had to retry. And then two more mentioned from our kind of sponsors here, MemVerge and NF Quilt, both here partners with Seqera, working to build additional functionality into Nextflow for their platforms. And in fact, Ernie is giving a talk tomorrow about NF Quilt, so you can hear more about that there. And if you're interested, please go and chat to them. So it's a really nice entry point into extending Nextflow. This is a slide I added in this morning based on some conversations I had in the Cheeky Monkey last night at the NF Core Hackathon Social. And we were chatting about how many people are starting to use Nextflow pipelines more and more for clinical settings and doing things to do with accreditation, be it with the FDA here in the States or ISO accreditation in Europe. And while no two kind of validations will ever be the same as one another, they do share a lot in common. And so I think there's a lot of appetite for how can we apply this model of collaboration, which we've seen with the code in NF Core and Nextflow, how can we apply a similar kind of idea of collaboration against the actual paperwork that everyone's having to do. So if anyone's interested in this, I'd love to continue this conversation. We've got 2 channels in the NF Core Slack, one called regulatory and one called benchmarking on those 2 topics. And for example, I'd love to put together like a web page pointing to all the known public documents for reference. And maybe even in the future, we could have NF Core modules tagged with any kind of FDA regulations which they've been used in previously to make it easy to build new ones. Some other big projects from the NF Core infrastructure team. This one is close to my heart. The old NF Core pipeline was written by me in a rush in 2018 in PHP and hosted on my personal server. And it sat there for a long time, did remarkably well really, but was starting to creak a little bit. And this year, mostly Matthias Hertenhuber in Sweden has completely rebuilt the NF Core website and building with modern JavaScript frameworks, and specifically this Astro framework, much more robust. We have some lovely new functionality such as a site-wide search, which makes the documentation way more accessible. And so this has been a huge effort from him and obviously impacts the community a lot and hopefully makes it much easier to contribute to things like documentation. So that's been a big improvement. And then on the tooling, there's some really nice projects we're working on. There's been a lot of work on improving the NF Core download tool. And people building pipelines from the NF Core template often say, it comes with all this stuff that I don't really need. So I run NF Core create, and then I end up sitting there deleting all this code that I don't need. And so something that we have worked on and are continuing to work on is making that template more fine-grained so you can choose up front which bits you need. And if you want, you come out with a very minimal lightweight pipeline, which still is compatible with all of the NF Core tooling, or comes out with all of the bells and whistles that you need to build a fully compliant NF Core pipeline for the community. And a little kind of sub-project of this, which I'm quite excited about, is using a package called Textual in Python, which generates terminal user interfaces, TUIs instead of GUIs. And here you can see this is a demo of a pull request which is currently in development on NF Core Tools branch for building, instead of NF Core Create, it's NF Core Pipelines Create. And you can see this is a much more user-friendly way to create pipelines. And this is hopefully a taste of what the future holds for the developer experience with NF Core. Pipeline creation is the first command we're doing this with, but you can see how this would be immediately applicable for launching pipelines, where you can have validation and help text alongside every single parameter. Also, installing modules, seeing diffs of updates. We could apply this kind of interface to most of the commands within F Core, and I'm really excited to see where this goes. And I hope that this makes the Nextflow developer experience much more accessible to people in the community. No longer do you have to be quite so worried about using a terminal, hopefully. Something we started, or actually it's kind of been dribbling along with Seqera for a long time. Rob Lalonde started it many years ago and sort of been taken over a bit by the community team and scaled up over the last year or so, is a podcast which we've been doing dedicated to Nextflow, which we've called Channels. And this kind of goes out in all the usual places, Spotify or Apple Podcasts, and we have put a video version up on YouTube. And it's kind of fairly niche. We go quite in depth on some topics. But it's kind of basically started with our team where we were having all these really interesting conversations talking about stuff going on in the community, talking with the team developing Nextflow about up-and-coming features and what was difficult and why different approaches were happening. And I kind of thought I wanted to capture these conversations because they're fascinating. And so we started recording them and calling it a podcast. So it's a pretty kind of relaxed setup. So we've started putting these out every couple of weeks on Mondays and racked up very quickly 24 episodes. And they cover all kinds of topics. You can see the last few listed here. Last two were Geraldine interviewing, well actually I interviewed Geraldine, and then Geraldine interviewing people from the community at the last event, but also then kind of in-depth topics here about live debugging within your editor of Nextflow pipelines. Someone was asking about visualizing what's within a Nextflow channel. There's a way to do this with interactive debuggers now. So we've got an episode about that and an episode pretty much dedicated to why error messages are difficult to make better, which is a topic close to everybody's heart, and all kinds of things. So if it sounds interesting, have a look and check it out. And you can find all these listed on the NF Core website, on the Nextflow website. Okay, and then I'm running out of time, but I'll touch quickly on a few new initiatives which we've launched just in the last month or so. A big one is the new Nextflow Ambassadors program. This is said at the start, this is very much a grassroots community where we see kind of demand in a bottom-up way. And we saw again and again people in the community running training, giving talks about Nextflow and NF Core, and really kind of going to great efforts to kind of spread the word about Nextflow and advocate for Nextflow in their communities. And so we've started this new program of Nextflow Ambassadors to recognize those people and support them. Be it we have a travel fund for ambassadors to go to events if they're doing things related to Nextflow. I've got a bit about this. We're developing a new set of training, like Train the Trainers, to help people deliver training in their local sites, which we'll make that material available to everybody publicly, but to start off with, we're going to work with the ambassadors to develop it. And of course, there's some exclusive swag, so you get a nice t-shirt and some stickers. And really kind of what we're expecting the ambassadors can do is kind of engage with their local communities. There's the community team in Seqera's 3 or 4 of us, depending on whether I still count. There's only kind of so much we can do, basically, as we scale. The community gets bigger and bigger, and there's only so many hours in the day. So our hope is that the ambassadors will kind of help us and work together with us to really reach out to all corners of the earth. And we have a webpage up about this on the Nextflow website where you can kind of read more. And basically, so far we've kind of reached out to people who are already doing this stuff. That's kind of the thrust we'll continue to go with, where we know that there's so much community activism already. So if you think this kind of fits you and fits your interests and what you'd like to do, check it out. And you can see the first round of ambassadors, which are basically many of the people from the NF Core community who we already knew were super active, but we'll be reviewing all the applications in a couple of weeks for the next kind of batch. And there's a little handbook which tells you more. Next up is the new community forum. So mentioned by a few people is that Slack is great, but it's kind of a black box. You type your random error message into Google and often you don't find a lot. But you load up Slack and you register and you log in and you type it into the Slack search box, and you will often find people searching for similar things. And that's fine, but it's not great. And also, as we get to really kind of ridiculous numbers in the community, we start to feel that Slack is struggling slightly to keep up with the volume of messages which we're getting. So we're not going to stop using Slack anytime soon. Everything was going to continue, but a new tool that we're bringing out alongside is a community forum, which runs on Discourse. It's a very popular forum platform, and also this covers all the different products within Seqera because they overlap so much. Very often there's an issue which is to do with Nextflow, but actually it's to do with Wave. And so by having all of this in one place, we can move things around or tag them and bring people in. And this is all publicly visible without login. So please go and have a look and sign up and post questions there, and hopefully we'll start to get kind of a real momentum behind this new community forum soon. Final announcement is our moderator, you've seen already, and I think probably particularly famous in these parts, and Geraldine, who we're very excited to welcome to Seqera. She started, your first day was in the first day of the Barcelona summit, so we really threw her in the deep end. Got her interviewing people in the community on day 2. So we're really excited that Geraldine's joining the team, formerly working at Broad, and literally kind of wrote the book on genomics in the cloud. So yeah, so if you're interested in working with the community, especially, of course, Geraldine lives here in Boston, so a local representative able to pop out and visit you in person and help with training and anything like that. So please do get in touch if there's anything we can do together. Right, with that, I'd be very happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Phil, for this amazing updates. This is obviously a lot happening in the community. We're actually out of time for questions, but I believe you're familiar with our Slack. Yeah. All right. So thank you, Phil.